I actually really wanted to be in art school, but my parents would never let me go to art school.
Right.
So I ended up trying to get in a sculpture class and I couldn't, so I took a photography class, and that kind of changed my whole life. Was taking that photography class. I realized that I started seeing the world in a completely different way. I started looking at light in a different way, at color and shape and paintings in a different way. And I mean, everything changed for me. And started thinking about space and form and perception. And for me, I was really interested in what creates meaning. I mean, how does the human perception receive meaning? How do we create meaning with images, with different contexts, with different forms and shapes, and light? But I was really interested in the beginning in political documentary and political feature films. You know, I was very heavily influenced by Gavras, for example, who did Missing and Z. And so I started going to school, and at a certain point in 1984, because I was doing on the side, I needed to create a thesis project. So that's why I decided I would do a film about the Southeast Asians, because I was really interested in the political history of what had happened in Southeast Asia, as well as American foreign policy, and the mistakes that we had made in Asia, and how we continue to see them today.
Absolutely, it sounds a little bit like what's going on in Europe.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So that, so that was something that I was really interested in, is trying to find the personal story in the historical, and the historical in the personal, and the political.
Right.
And so that's, so that project started as a thesis project. So I hired a cinematographer. I got a small grant based on my photography from the National Endowment of the Humanities. And I started putting the film project together. And of course I didn't know anything about film production.
You were very young at this stage, I assume.
Very young.
Yeah.
I was probably 22,
Yeah.
23. And, but I knew I wanted to make this film. I consider myself a filmmaker, and I knew I had certain things I wanted to say and explore through this film. So I started trying to plan and shoot it. So I did about 6 months of research with this one family, and in the course of doing some shooting with them, I realized that I wanted to be able to speak the language. So I put the word out in New York, where I was living at the time, and I knew that there was a small community in Brooklyn, and I put the word out that I wanted to speak loud, and I wanted somebody to teach me. So one day, Tavi-san called me up on the phone, and he said, "Who are you, and why do you want to learn how to speak my language?" Because he was a refugee who basically got dropped into Brooklyn, into a very, very bad neighborhood.
Right.
And I said, yeah, I'm making a film, and I want to speak to the people. I don't want to have to go through a translator. I want to be able to speak to the old ladies and speak to the kids. And so twice a week, he would come to my apartment on 14th Street, and we would sit down and we would have loud lessons. And I have
Can you speak it? Can you give us an example?
You can handsome dive Kalana Bokane Hangnam Yusai. So the first one is, have you eaten lunch yet? Or have you eaten dinner yet?
Yeah.
And the second one is Kaluna Bokane Hangnam Yusai, which means, can you please tell me where the bathroom is?
Right.
Two key phrases.
Yes. They must have been very flattered the fact that you made that commitment, that you wanted to be able to really communicate with them.
Yeah, I think it's important for anybody in any country, I mean, even if you speak a few words of someone's language.
Yeah.
And because I find Americans are so egocentric sometimes. They expect that everybody has to speak English.
Yeah.
And it's like, excuse me, but you're not the only ones in the world.
Right, yeah.
It's like if you go to somebody else's country, make an effort to at least know how to speak a couple of words.
Exactly.
Say hello and thank you at least. And people appreciate it.
Yeah, they really do.
They do.
Really do.
And that's being a human being.
Yeah.
I was like, what makes something work and when does it not work?
Yeah.
So that's when I picked up the camera, and I thought, I need to discover for myself what this is. And that's when I realized that it was about the search for meaning. It's about the search for visual metaphor. That every shot that a cinematographer takes has meaning to it. That there's a reason why you pan from A to B. There's a reason why you rack focus. it's just not arbitrary. You're telling a story with the camera.
Yeah.
So you, as a cinematographer, you have to know what that story is, or you have to have a sense that you're discovering that story through the lens. And a lot of people don't know, they don't realize that. Cinematographers don't realize that. It's amazing to me.
Yeah.
Even top cinematographers, they're just going for what seems to be the superficial appearance of the image. But they don't understand that the resonance of what's in the image, has meaning to it. And that goes back to my early studies in France, where you learn that, it's not subjective. I mean, it's not objective. Everything is subjective.
Yeah.
To call documentary objective is a fallacy. Documentary is absolutely subjective. Everything is subjective. And that's why, I was really interested in the idea of propaganda. Because when we make movies, we are creating propagandas. We ask that person who's looking at it to believe in what we're showing them, to be taken into the world, to believe that this story is the truth.
Yeah, absolutely.
And, advertising is more overt form of propaganda, so to speak, but everybody in the advertising world that I know is always trying to make it
pretend that it's not. Exactly. So the relationship between the director and the cinematographer is absolutely critical, isn't it, in terms of the storytelling and making sure that you're both looking for the same outcome.
Yes, the same idea.
The same idea.
Exactly.
Yes.
When I'm shooting a film, I always insist on a time with the director.
Yeah.
At least 4 days to sit with the script, with the director, by him or herself, so that we can go through each scene bit by bit. So I want to ask some questions before we get on set to say, so what do you mean in this scene? What do you want to say with this scene? What's the essence of the scene? Because there's a reason for it to be there.
Yeah.
It's just not arbitrary that they just walk down the street. There's a reason for why the scene is there.
Yeah. And so for you to interpret it.
Exactly. I'm trying to get into their mind's eye to understand what the intention is.
Yeah.
Because then that tells me how it's to be shot. And it's the same thing in commercials now. I'm directing commercials. I ask the same question to the agency. What's your message? What do you want to say?
Yeah.
So when I get on a call with them, that's the first thing I'm thinking about is what's the message? And how do you want to approach the message? How much do you want to cash the message in what we're seeing?
Yeah.
Is it overt? Is it about the product? Is it not about the product, but it's an analogy to the product? I mean,
they're all important things. I mean, I think they do it very overtly, with sort of some clients like Procter & Gamble, where you really do analyse each shot in terms of what the message is. And I think in advertising often we're trying not to analyse it too much, we're trying to just sort of think about a compelling story.
It's not just about the words, it's also about the image.
Yeah.
So the two work together in concert to create the story.
Yeah. Yeah.
So for me, it's been interesting being able to be on both sides of the camera. As a cinematographer and as a cinematographer director, to look at how story is made and listening, having been in the feature world as well as the commercial world, and seeing how they differ and what the timber of the story is. For lack of a better expression, I'm a person who's passionate about all aspects of film. It's like being a Renaissance person where, you're a poet, but also you can write a play. And also, it's like I'm engaged in the process of the film medium, of making films and making pictures.
Yeah.
And communicating ideas. So that's really where it comes from. So they're both related. And I mean, that's the thing about, I don't believe that advertising agencies look at you and go like, oh, well, is he going to be a cinematographer or a director? It's like, I end up doing both anyway.
Absolutely.
So why is one?
And you've benefited from working with a lot of, really fantastic directors. We were talking a little bit about Spike Lee and Michel Gondry. I mean, you've worked with some fantastic people. Was there anybody that sort of mentored you at the beginning, or was there anybody that you felt gave you a break? Because it's hard, isn't it? It's really hard to get into the business, and I imagine as a woman it's even harder.
Well, it was interesting because when I started, there were very, very few women working in the
Yeah.
industry. You know, most of the women who were in the industry were producers or editors.
Yeah.
You know, I didn't see any camera people.
No. And you entered as an electrician, didn't you? Wasn't one of your very first jobs doing the electrician work as opposed to going into the camera department?
Well, interestingly, I started shooting. Everybody has always known me as a shooter,
Yeah.
as a cinematographer. But I realized soon, everybody in my world, in my early world, has always seen me as a cinematographer.
Yeah.
As a director, actually. I started as a director who then started doing cinematography.
Yeah.
But I realized when I picked up the camera that I didn't know the first thing about lighting. I wanted to be able to understand how to create the light. So what the lights were called, because I thought if I'm going to be working in the cinematography world, I want to know how to communicate with the people who are working for me.
Right.
I want to know what the lights are called. I want to know what it's like to carry the cable. I want to know that job.
Right.
I want to know how to shape the light. And in order to be able to know it, I have to do it.
Right.
And so that's why I, on the side, would be an electrician.
Yeah.
You know, I never felt myself a victim. Like,
Yeah.
I didn't take it personally. And I think that's a key thing, and I think that's a key thing for women to remember, is that I wasn't like, oh, poor me, I didn't have a chance because I'm a woman. I never ever saw it that way.
Right.
When I was growing up, I was surrounded by doing a lot of things around the house. I was never afraid of work. You know, my father, worked us like slaves. We built the patio, we put the gutters on, we painted the house, we put the roof on. He was a really can-do kind of a person.
Yeah.
He was a brilliant engineer. And it didn't matter whether, you were male or female.
Yeah.
My brother, my sisters, and I, we all worked the same. So I never saw the difference when I was growing up. So I never victimized myself either.
But what's sort of interesting is I went to the DGA the other day. They were doing this sort of digital day, and they were talking about some of the numbers of women in digital production, in online production, in new media, and actually the numbers are tremendous. It's sort of like, it was almost like over 50% of the women directors in new media are women.
It's changing.
Yeah.
For me, on my side, I see many, many more women on set now.
Yeah.
Who are technicians. I think that people realize that, women are really good technicians.
Yeah.
And that they're very organized and that they keep all the shit together,
And women realise it. I think more women are growing up thinking that that's what they want to do, and they're sort of embracing the technology. Because it's the same with visual effects. I went to this visual effects summit, and Victoria Alonso, who's the head of Marvel, she was literally sort of saying, we've got to get more women in the industry. It's like...
Well, she's a good role model.
She's a really good role model, yeah.
This is the thing is that, in the past, and I think it's not only the film industry, I think it runs across all professions.
Yeah.
My sister's a doctor, and she encounters similar kind of assumptions.
Yeah.
And I think it is embedded into the culture. I think it's systematic, and it's basically like here in the film world, the studio system versus the independent world, there's been a lot more opportunity in the independent world.
Yeah.
You asked me earlier how I got my chances, my opportunity. My opportunity was given to me in a large part by Christine Vachon, who was starting independent. Yes. Yeah. And that's unusual. Yeah. Because a lot of times women themselves are too afraid to support other women because they're afraid that if that woman fails, that will bear negatively on that woman.
Yeah.
But what the problem with that cultural assumption is that women have to prove themselves. Men have to prove themselves too.
Yeah.
But I think what happens is that they're already in the pool. It's assumed that they're allowed to be in the pool. It's being able to allow women into the pool to be considered.
Yeah.
That's, I think, a really key thing. It's sort of like knowing that, yeah, you can be here too, instead of turning around and being surprised that, oh, the girls are here.
Yeah,
You know, so I think that the opportunity is so key. I've been so fortunate because I've had opportunity and I've had a lot of acclaim in the very beginning. You know, the first feature film I ever made was won the Sundance Cinematography Award.
Yeah.
You know, I've won the Cinematography Award 3 times at Sundance, and nobody's ever done that.
No, I know. I mean, that's why you're legendary.
Yeah.
Because and was that with a female director? Was that Rebecca Miller or?
The first one was with Tom Kalin,
Right.
and the second 2 were with Rebecca Miller.
Yeah.
So, you know, if given opportunity, women can do it. They don't
Yeah.
have to prove themselves. I never thought that I had to prove myself to anybody. I just
Yeah.
wanted to do really good work. And that's why I think a lot of them want to do really good work. They want to know that they can do work and that we can do it. I mean,
Yeah.
I do all different kinds of stories. It's like when people chastise Spike Lee for doing Summer of Sam, which was a story about an Italian neighborhood, it was like, give me a fucking break.
Yeah.
You know, it's like, you can make stories about anybody. He doesn't have to make stories about African American people just because he's African American.
Yes,
I think it's
absolutely.
really ridiculous.
Yeah.
You know.
But watching programs like Amazon and Netflix and Transparency, things, you know, like Transparency for me was so sort of liberating. It was so fantastic to watch because it just felt like we were moving things just from a sort of a humour standpoint, and the fact that we were talking about subjects that were so taboo, you know, a few years ago. It seems to be coming into the mainstream a little bit more.
Well, this is what I think is really interesting about this discussion. It's bringing the discussion into the mainstream.
Yes.
It's making people more aware of what the playing field is.
Yeah.
You know, and the fact is that the marketplace is going to dictate it in a large sense. The guys would say, oh, well, you know, can women make, you know, can you make an action picture or can you, I mean, I'm not afraid of shooting an action picture.
Absolutely.
The question is, you know, what do you want to do? But I don't think that, you know, you can say that women don't bring in money to the box office, you know, if they haven't had a chance to. You know, not given a chance, it's like, how do you know? That's a presupposition. But I do think that this whole discussion has brought it into the mainstream and that we will see that cable is going to be very different. I find that the people who are doing cable or doing Netflix, who are doing Amazon, who are doing, you know, HBO are people who, they want good work.
Yeah.
They don't care what color you are or
absolutely.
you know what gender you are. It's like it's going to change. It is changing. And that's why I try to make myself as visible as possible, because I know that for a lot of people, and this is not only goes for women but for young men filmmakers too, it's like if they see that I can do it, then they believe that they can do it too.
Yes.
And that's really important, is to have the confidence to not feel yourself a victim, not to say like, oh, poor me, I'm a woman, I'm not getting the same chances. It's like, you know what, you've got to get rid of that and just move forward and just be confident and do the work as best you can, you know. And unfortunately, you are going to run up against old ideas, but that's the whole thing about breaking into the new. And people will say to me, you know, oh, well, how does it feel to have a man's job?
Right.
You know,
Really? People say that?
Oh yeah, and I laughed and I go, I don't have a man's job,
No.
I have my own job.
Absolutely.